All right, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nancy Mack, and on behalf of Drexel University's Neuroscience Graduate Students for Diversity Group, I am delighted to welcome you to our first Real Talk panel discussion entitled Graduate School in STEM and Beyond. I will be the host of today's session, and before I hand it over to our wonderful panelists, I'd like to encourage you all to use the Q&A function to ask questions at any time throughout our presentation. Our panelists would love nothing more than to answer all of your questions, so please don't hesitate to send them in. And at the end of the presentation, I will read them out for our panelists to answer for you. So now at this time, I'm going to hand it over to our panel and we'll get this Real Talk started. Kayla, you can take it away.
Awesome, perfect. Welcome everyone, and today I'll be giving a little bit of a talk, and let's get started. So first, just a little bit about ourselves. We're the Neuroscience Graduate Students for Diversity, and we're from Drexel University. We were just founded in the summer of 2020, and we are a diverse group of graduate students from different departments and disciplines. And our values and our mission statement, for us, what we really believe in is that we really believe that it is extremely vital for every single individual within and without academia to be treated equally with equity and respect. And what we want to do is to actually give accessible resources for all individuals so that they can find better equity. So we have two different social media platforms, and I've included the little social media links on the screen before you, and we have our OGLE as well. And so thank you all for coming to Real Talk, and let's just quickly discuss who we are and how we all got here. And so for all of us, we've come from a variety of different backgrounds, ranging from industry to academia, and as well as other places such as government, medicine, and other fields. And we all had different starting places, whether we started off as a research technician in industry or even at the different educational levels in different roles within academia. And so what I really want to emphasize here is that while we all start in different places, we can all achieve what we want to do in future careers through a variety of different paths and means. And so going forward, I just wanted to quickly discuss exactly what is graduate school. I'm sure some of you have been thinking at this point what to do next after this year or even like beyond this year. And graduate school is just a higher level of education where you can get a degree in a specialized field. And it's an opportunity to dive into your favorite topic. A lot of individuals go to graduate school to kind of push their boundaries a little bit in terms of achieving what is beyond the glass ceiling in different careers. And you can do so through going and receiving different degrees. And so there are several routes to getting to graduate school, as well as several routes within and even beyond it. Some of the reasons why people attend graduate school, as I mentioned earlier, is to kind of get beyond that kind of glass ceiling or closed doors. And it's also an opportunity to really become like an expert in a field. And there's a really cool graphic I've attached on the right-hand side where in a lot of ways, graduate school can kind of be like kindergarten. You do have like that napping feature, which I am a big fan of, and you can definitely take it at any time. And there is a lot of supervision, but also a lot of room for creativity, and also some of the things that you thought you would never do again, like copy cutting and pasting, becomes key skills some days in some of the work that you do. And so with that being aside, you know, graduate school is a way to really grow your skill set in a given scientific field or even within other skill sets such as communication, professionalism, management, and even leadership. And so with graduate school, one of the reasons why people really attend it is to actually enter into other fields, whether you're going from industry to academia or vice versa, and as well as to really kind of build your network with other like-minded scientists or even scientists outside of your traditional research field. And I did mention a little bit earlier that there is a whole slew of different graduate degrees that you can actually attain. And some of them I've listed actually on the screen before you today. And these are the ones that we'll be focusing on kind of in this talk. And so we do have a Master's of Science. That's really kind of the in-between degree. It is a graduate degree that you can achieve after getting your bachelor's. However, there are also what's called terminal degrees, such as Doctor of Philosophy, a Doctor of Science, or even Doctors of Medicine and Philosophy, or MD, PhD. And all of these can go into different research fields that can range in different branches, such as neurology, as it says in our name, as well as microbiology, immunology, so on and so forth. But it can also extend into even medicine for the MD, PhD, where you also have research disciplines focused on dental or veterinary medicine, or even within neurology, and so on and so forth. And so let's jump into exactly what each degree entails and what is exactly needed in order to achieve each degree. So master's degree as a whole, they average about 1 to 2 years, and there are different formats that really you can pick and choose to see what works best for you. These formats are thesis or non-thesis, and what this means, a thesis is really just creating a project that contributes to the current scientific understanding. And a non-thesis is really, while it is giving you that skill set in order to continue on with your careers, it is mainly based on really analyzing the current understanding of the scientific research that there is out there. And so there is a whole variety of different tuitions depending on the programs and the schools that you attend. However, financing options are available. So depending on the school and the program, some programs you do receive a stipend, or you can do work study programs where you're able to actually build your skill set and at the same time finish your degree. And so some key points that is really vital to consider when you're looking into your master's is that you really need to figure out what field you're interested in, what mentor you would like to work with if you're doing a thesis option, as well as the lab that you're joining. And there are several alternative routes to getting your master's degree, or even what you do after or during. And so a lot of companies that you work for in industry do provide a financing option to help you get your master's degrees. And this can also be done in academia. And so the use of a master's is really to get it to the next level in any of the fields that I mentioned earlier. The next is kind of, after this point, we have a series of terminal degrees. So the first is Doctor of Philosophy, or PhD, as it's for short. And this degree does take a lot longer than master's. It's typically averaging between 4 to 7 years, depending on the program and the school that you join. And there are different formats for each. Typically, the format is that you build a large skill set while working in a particular field. And you typically have some of your coursework in the beginning, while the rest of your education is spent on really bringing a thesis to completion. And so it depends also on what country you're considering on doing your PhD in. There's some differences between the US versus the UK. And again, the key points for this is really just figuring out what field you're interested in. And from there, like seeing if you really identify with a mentor or a lab culture. Tuition is also varied. Some schools do waive tuition completely, and they also provide some stipends. So stipends do vary based on school and program. And the use of the PhD is really to achieve, once again, more independence and also more job opportunities in academia, industry, government, or other fields. And so MD, PhD, or physician scientist, is actually this very interesting fusion between a Doctor of Science, or a Doctor of Philosophy, excuse me, as well as medicine. And it does take a lot more time, as you can imagine, where you have up to 9 years on average to achieve this degree. And since it's a dual degree, you actually have to undergo your medical school training first, then undergo your thesis research training, which can average up to 5 years before you complete your medical training in your clinical rotations. And a lot of the MD PhD programs, if not all, the tuition is completely waived. The stipend, however, much like the PhD, is varied. And so some of the key points is pretty much the same as a master's or even a PhD, where you really have to figure out what field you're most interested in and the mentor that you would like to work with. However, what's unique to this is that you are also considering the clinical focus of your degree. And so the use of an MD PhD is to really kind of achieve very select and specialized roles within academia, industry, or medicine. And so we talked a lot about degrees, we talked about graduate schools. Now let's just get into some of the questions I'm sure you're thinking about as to like, what's the use of these degrees and what jobs can we actually achieve in STEM? And so with STEM, you need to have an open-minded approach. There are several different fields and subfields out there. However, you don't need to work in the same field that you achieve your degree in. So you can definitely get a degree within microbiology and end up working in neurology or any of the fields out there. And so on top of all of that, you can actually work in different industries as well, such as within academia, where you have more research versus teaching-based options. You can work in developing vaccines or pharmaceuticals in industry. There's also fields that most people don't consider necessarily with regulations and policy, or even working within medicine in non-clinical settings. And so I'll get into a little bit about each of the points listed on the screen before you today in later slides. And so this is a really cool graphic as to kind of give you a small picture of all the different careers that there are out there that is not necessarily promoted as much. And so with academia, you have, at least for the jobs in academia, you have the greatest amount of freedom in research. And there is different levels of teaching and research requirements within academia. And like in most places, academia actually has different research activity levels, or what's like commonly referred to as like research levels, or R1 to R3, and the different numbers signify like how research intensive an institution may be. And so with these research fields, or research levels, sorry, you can actually find them in different types of institutions, whether they're your just regular undergraduate institutions or even other institutions such as medical schools. And so in academia, there are different pathways to get to different career types. For an individual, for example, who is achieving their PhD, there is this whole traditional track of actually achieving a tenured professorship position. And I showed you an example of one of the ways you can actually achieve this position on the screen in front of you today. In industry, there's a lot more structure in comparison to academia, and there's some variety in research freedom. And any educational degree level may work with, in this case, where you have the quote unquote glass ceilings based on the different degrees that are being achieved. And with industry, you have a lot of different subfields where you range from anywhere from pharmaceuticals all the way to managing, clinical trials, to even doing different research projects, or even starting different research initiatives in research-intensive institutions. And so with this, I do want to emphasize that there's also varying levels of independence. So it's a very collaborative environment, a very structured environment with different degrees of research freedom. The government is much more structured than industry or academia, and there's less individual pressure in terms of the work that you're doing. There are several different organizations that you can find an extensive amount of STEM jobs in. And some of the examples I've actually listed in front of you today, and you don't necessarily need to know exactly which one you are delving into in the beginning. You can actually look at each individual institution and their core values and beliefs in order to see what's the best fit for you. Some of the ones that I've included in front are the NIH, or the National Institute of Health, which I'm sure most of you have heard a lot more than you would like lately, as well as the NIAID. A spokesperson that I'm sure many of you are acquainted with is Dr. Anthony Fauci. And also I have some listed, I have some other organizations listed in terms of more of what they do, not necessarily just their entities as a whole. So example, if someone was more interested in science, but also policy, you can go into regulatory bodies such as the FDA or the EPA. And also on the right-hand side, I've included some screenshots of different fellowships that people can apply. And I completely recommend looking into these fellowships, which can give you a taste of what working in such an environment is like. And we also have clinical research STEM jobs, and these jobs are very interesting because certainly anybody who has a master's or a PhD can work in here. However, MD PhDs do excel within this field of STEM, in which case working within a clinical setting, you have a lot of collaborative work, a little bit less structure, and there are jobs that are really focused on really crunching the numbers in terms of data science research, as well as setting up, managing, and even designing clinical trials, which are extremely vital, especially in today's world. There's also the work involved in developing different pharmaceuticals and even developing different diagnostic tests. And this is especially seen within the hospital setting where you have a lot of the different research development being conducted there in CLIA labs. So I've mentioned a lot of the big 3 routes or big 4 routes that are typically taken when individuals are considering different STEM jobs, but there's also jobs outside of academia, industry, or even the government. There's this whole field of science communication where you have the option to either be extremely collaborative or independent, depending on your preference. And with science communication, there are several different platforms, and for each platform, there's a different range of audiences. And so some of the examples I've listed on the screen before you, where we have mainstream media, which is a little bit unusual to think about, but a lot of the science that's being presented to you in the media is actually vetted by different science communicators. And some of the common media routes are television, radio, and movies, but also in some of the less traditional platforms, such as a newspaper and magazines, or even within making different art or for infographics, or even within, you know, pop science media, such as the movies that you see today. So some of the growing fields are pop sci, which is translating scientific research for a general audience. And this is key, especially nowadays, where we have a constant influx of information, and we really need to sift out what needs to be presented to the world, as well as science policy in order to actually translate all of these findings into what needs to be done for the general populace. Some examples of great science communicators out there are Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I'm sure some of you have seen some of the really interesting videos that they like to kind of publish every once in a while. And for individuals that are really interested in science communication, I strongly encourage looking into the different media platforms that you like, and also some of the science communicators that really have mastered that platform. And you know, what else is out there with STEM? What else is out there outside of science communication and the other different fields that I've mentioned? And so science does overlap with a lot of other career fields. It's not just something in research or even in communication. There are different groups out there that are centered more on business and entrepreneurship and really the business of science, as well as law. An example of this could be seen in intellectual property. A little bit more about the media. There's actually science and filmmaking, and on the right-hand side, there's actually really cool snippets of different universities out there, not just, you know, what you hear like different programs in the news. They have actual degrees in just creating scientific programs for SciComm or even just making films. And with communication, as I mentioned earlier, it's really about translating some skills into the management or into other fields. And so some conclusions. I've certainly given you a lot of information and probably rambled a bit. So there are several routes out there for each STEM field. as well as different routes that you can achieve different degrees or even the careers that you may have been dreaming about or even wondering if they exist out there. And so with all of that, there are several different ways that you can be employed in all of the different branches of STEM, and some of these jobs overlap. And in science, regardless of what is being promoted out there, there's a lot of room for creativity and flexibility. And there is a lot of flexibility in terms of the kind of work structure you may have and how much independence you can achieve in your jobs. And with all of this, I think an important point is that financing is possible, and it's actually really doable to achieve the jobs and the degrees that you may be thinking of. And it's also extremely okay to not have it completely figured out when you apply or even during your graduate school experience. So with that being said, any questions?
Kayla, thank you so much for that informative presentation. I want to kick off this Q&A session by first giving our panelists a chance to just sort of describe how you guys got into science and kind of your path to graduate school. So Kayla, do you want to kick us off with that? Or actually, you know what? You've been chatting a bunch, so I'm gonna jump around. Michaela, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michaela. I am a fourth year PhD student in neuroscience. And I don't know how much to go into or where to start, but I guess briefly growing up and stuff, I was not like sure what I wanted to do, if anything. I actually kind of thought I was going to go into like journalism because I like to write. I didn't think I had any sort of talent actually in STEM. And I thought STEM would just be a lot of math and boring things. And then over the years, especially in like high school, I started getting more and more interested in like the brain, and specifically like how is it that our brains perceive the entire world around us, and everything that we touch, feel, think, anything is processed by your central nervous system. So that was kind of what kicked off my interest in neuroscience. But so I knew I wanted to kind of continue pursuing some sort of education in neuro. But for me, it was difficult financially because I really did not know how I would afford to even go to college, much less like anything beyond that. And so when I was in high school, actually, I applied for these like summer programs in neuro. And there are a lot of like dean scholarships or just other scholarships. And that was really great for me to kind of kick off learning about neuro. Then for grads or for going to undergrad to college, I basically just applied for a lot of scholarships, and I solely chose schools that had a BS in neuroscience because I just like knew that that was what I was really passionate about. And so I got my BS in neuro at UVM, University of Vermont. And then I chose to apply to grad school purely because I knew I could not afford to take on any debt from med school. And I wasn't super convinced that having your BS would help you in the job market as much. And I knew I needed a good enough paying job to pay back my student loans and also not accrue any more student loans. So that's how I really liked doing research. So there's that. But the money component was a really big aspect for my decision. And then, so choosing to apply to grad school came up because you actually get paid for your education throughout your education, all the years that, I mean, if you're a PhD student, you get paid throughout. And you also get health insurance covered, and they pay for your tuition and fees. So that was something where I was like, great, I can like be paid to get my higher degree to then go and make money to be able to like survive. But then I also was just like really interested. I started off being really interested in like the brain and how that processes things. But over the years, I got interested in the spinal cord, and I kind of was just thrown into it. So now I study spinal cord injury and how your neuroimmune system responds to that. And that's what my thesis is in. So it's a combination of neuroscience, immunology, and cardiovascular activity is my thesis. I guess that sums it up.
Thank you, Michaela. You dropped a few good gems in there that I'm going to circle back to after we introduce anybody. So Ashley, would you like to go next?
Yeah, can you hear me well? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley, and I'm a second-year PhD student in neuroscience. If we did not mention this, we're all at Drexel University College of Medicine. And my story is kind of similar to Michaela's. Growing up, I always was interested in like science, and I was pretty outdoorsy. So I knew that, you know, biology and all of that was kind of something I would focus on. And I know also the only thing I knew of growing up was that there was like a medical doctor, and particularly no one in my family really went to college, or at least in my immediate family. So I just had this goal to become a medical doctor. And, you know, once I went to college, or at least when I was nearing college, I heard about neuroscience by watching something on TV. And then actually someone that I played soccer with got a pretty bad concussion and like interesting lost her memory for a whole month. And it like, you know, one day she woke up and it was just already back. So that was around the time, I think my senior year. And I just really thought that that was so fascinating about how that happened. And there was really no explanation. So I kind of heard about research around that time because, you know, I talked to some peers and things. And then I applied to schools that had neuroscience programs based on that. And I am from the Scranton area in Pennsylvania, so pretty close, 2 hours away. And I ended up going to school locally because they offered me a good amount of scholarship money. And there you know, I was pre-med. I was interested in going into medicine, becoming a medical doctor. And then I ended up getting involved with the neuroscience club at my school. And basically, I think within the first month of college, I figured out that there's a research career and people did research for fun. So that like entirely changed my view on like what I wanted to do. And basically throughout college, I was still interested in medicine and research. So I had the goal of, you know, doing that dual degree program. And so anyways, I, over my summers in school and college, I did some summer research programs. And I think eventually we're gonna share in our future panels, like what those are and how they do them. But I was able to, I stayed local for school, but I was able to travel across the country for 2 summers and I got paid to do it, which was really exciting and pretty fun because I learned a lot about, you know, more research options. And then at that point, when I was about to graduate college, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to go into medicine or research. So I ended up applying for jobs. And I worked as a research assistant at Drexel. And, you know, if you have any questions about how that process works or why I chose that, you know, that type of job. And then after being there for 2 years, I transitioned or applied to the PhD program. And here I am today. So thanks everyone for listening. Oh, and I study learning and memory, and I can go into that more, but I'm gonna share the floor here.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Jacqueline, would you like to go?
Hey guys, so I'm Jackie. I'm a 5th year PhD student. I'm also in the neuro department with Michaela and Ashley. So my first exposure to neuro was, it sort of started out more on the psychology side. So I took a AP psychology class in high school and I really loved it. So then from that point on, I decided to go for a degree in psychology or a major in psychology when I went to Temple, which is pretty local. And as I was taking that class or all those different classes, it tends to start to overlap with neuro. And so as I was getting into those classes, I thought, okay, I really like this. So I added it as a minor. And then come junior, senior year, I was kind of in that crisis of what the heck do I want to do with all this? So if there's junior or seniors here, have no fear. There's an end goal. Like, you get there. So I made a huge change from basically, you know, thinking I wanted to maybe go to grad school for psych. And then I thought, nope, neuro. Got a little bit of research kind of lab exposure my junior, senior year. So because of that, I didn't have that sort of hard science background. I started out as a master's student, but luckily Drexel kind of allows you to do this thing, which some programs do this. I don't know if all do this, which I think this does relate to someone's question they had, which we can circle back to. But Then after the 2 years as a master's student, I transitioned to a PhD student. And basically I was able to just continue on as if I was a third year. So I was lucky that I didn't have to sort of restart from the beginning. And basically what I do is, we're all neuro, so we're kind of biased here, but STEM is great in general. Um, but I do more spinal cord injury with bladder dysfunction, which sounds horrible, but I promise you it's not. And yeah, so that's me. But if you guys have any questions about, I guess, the whole transition from like master's to PhD, how that works, at least at Drexel, I can tell you it's not the same everywhere. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Jackie. Michaela, would you like to close us out?
Definitely. So I had a very roundabout way about getting into STEM. So I originally wanted to go to college to be a graphical designer for video games, but I really love science. And so going to school, it was a lot of me trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And at the time I was thinking pre-med, maybe neuro. Spoiler, it did not happen, either of those two. But I still applied to medical school. I had this belief and this passion that I wanted to work with people. And then right as I was applying, I realized I needed more research experience. So I decided to go and like prolong me trying to get into medical school. I applied, I got my master's first. I did some research and I found that I actually really loved it. I wanted to do more of it. And so from there, I did do a couple of, post-grad jobs. I worked as a postgrad, I worked as a research assistant actually at Drexel. And then I decided to commit and actually do my PhD because ultimately I do want to do research and have my own lab. And so that's a little bit of my really roundabout way of how I got to be where I am. And unlike everybody else, I am not actually in neuro, I'm in microbiology and immunology. And I research on infectious diseases, mainly with ticks.
Thank you, Kayla. Okay, so now I want to start to get into some of the questions from our attendees. So there's a couple questions that I think I can lump together. And so one of them is graduate school expensive? Where is a good source to apply for scholarships for graduate school? And then also, Michaela, you mentioned how, one of your motivating factors to go to graduate school was that you wouldn't have to take out more loans. You were looking for that paid position. And so I think a big misconception in students, looking into or interested in going to graduate school in STEM is, will I be funded? Will I not? What do I have to pay tuition? Will I not? So I want our panel to kind of speak on these types of questions. So I'll go ahead and give it to Michaela to kick off first, but all of you guys can go ahead and contribute to those.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I was going to ask also, do we want to stop screen share so that our faces are? But yeah, so I don't mind diving into it a little bit. I guess for me, it was that honestly, throughout my undergrad, I just had a lot of federal and private loans that I had to take out. And I knew right away that it would be very difficult for me to try to come back from. Even as a doctor, like an MD doctor, you still have a lot of expenses. And that's not to deter anybody from going that route, but I realized for me personally that I worked for one of my jobs in college was working with people with mental illnesses and substance abuse problems. And I, over time, realized I would much rather be at the bench than doing clinical work. And on top of that, it was that there are a lot of hidden expenses with getting your MD that people aren't necessarily aware about, like having insurance and those kinds of things. And so for me, with the amount of loans that I had accrued through undergrad, I kind of was like, oh, well, I'd much rather just go somewhere where I'm getting paid for my degree. At the same time, I'm gaining expertise where then you can go into, if you want to go into industry, like the starting salary is, I could be wrong, but I think it's around 80 to 90K. And then you can quickly bump your way up. And there are always great perks and stuff. And even in academia, can be affordable, and you're gonna make a good living and be able to have the things in life that you want to be able to have.
So do all STEM graduate programs pay the same?
No, yeah. And I see Jackie's unmuted too.
Oh, I just said no, and it just lined up.
You're
But
just so
no.
ready to be like, no.
I think generally that's based off of like the city or area that you're going to school in, right?
Yeah. So
Like the
actually,
cost of living. So like if you go to Boston, it's a little bit more than, I don't know, if you went to some like random no known town in like Michigan or something.
not
But
being mean to Michigan, but hey. And the thing is, when I got into when I was applying to grad schools, and also when I got into Drexel, I actually decided to break down the standard of living versus the tuition and your stipend to see exactly how much more you were making here compared to my undergrad. And it was actually really interesting to see that, because actually Drexel, for us at least, provides a very livable stipend where you're able to make, I pay my rent, credit cards, utilities, everything I need to, I'm able to afford. And that's even like by myself. I live with my boyfriend, but even if something happened and his income wasn't coming in, I know I'd be able to like cushion us for a bit. And that's one of the big things, because not all programs are that way. And so it kind of comes down to when you're offered the contract, you have to like sit down and kind of crunch those numbers and figure out what your average rent will probably be and the standard of living in that area compared to what they're offering for your stipend. And then more than that, it's also, are they covering your tuition? Are they covering your health insurance? How is that health insurance? And our current students at the school, how do they feel about the stipend and the health insurance? Like, is that actually, and I was once given advice that if you're looking at a program that does not offer a stipend for your research, do not go there, because that is a sham. You should be paid for your research.
It's like free labor. Don't do it.
Yeah. I want to give everybody an example. So everyone you see on screen right now is a graduate student at Drexel College of Medicine, whether we study neuroscience or Kayla studies microbiology and immunology. Graduate students in biology are at Drexel University get paid differently than us. They are paid a stipend to teach. So every semester they have to serve as a teaching assistant, and their stipend for their work comes through serving as a teaching assistant. And that's something they do in addition to their research as a graduate student. As students through the College of Medicine, we receive stipends for the research that we do. So we are not required to do additional, our stipend isn't funded through additional work such as teaching. So these are some of the examples of how you can actually get your PhD funded without looking for additional scholarships. But now I want to make sure we touch on a question that was asked by someone in the audience about where good a source to apply for scholarships for graduate school are. And I think this is very important, especially for people considering master's degrees, which often you have to pay for, which aren't funded. Do you want to, Jackie or Kayla, do you guys want to start that off?
I can chat a little bit about that. So I personally come from, it's not a big family, I'm one of three, but at the same time, one of my biggest motivators for each school, at least in the beginning, that I chose was whether or not I could do so independently, regardless of how much debt I was pulling, because I wanted to give my siblings a fair chance at going to school or even grad school. And so one of the things that I did when I was thinking about my master's program was I decided to apply to different scholarships out there. And so you can get them based on the field that you're interested in, as well as if you're a traditionally excluded minority, there are scholarships that are specially designed for you so that you have a fair chance of actually applying and receiving those scholarships. In addition to that, I worked throughout my master's, and I decided I really like teaching. And I actually worked as a teaching assistant throughout my entire master's. And it was nice at the university that I went to University of New Haven, where I was able to teach lab courses, and I eventually ended up teaching a course. And what they did is that they actually cut my tuition in half through the amount of hours and what I was doing as far as teaching assistant is concerned. Not all schools are like that, but those are two things that you can do in order to finance your, getting a master's degree.
Ashley, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I can add something real quick. So I know, as I mentioned, I didn't go straight to the PhD program and I needed to figure out what I was doing with my life. So I looked a lot into different options, transitioning from undergrad to graduate school or, professional school. And something that I found, so specifically with master's degrees, as Kayla kind of mentioned, there are the opportunity for you to get some of your tuition covered and sometimes even a stipend as well. And usually it's the graduate teaching assistantship. It's like at least locally, or I know at Villanova and the University of Scranton, they both have these opportunities where you can get some of your, or maybe even you can live off of that payment, you know what I mean, that stipend. Because I know for me, I didn't want, as Michaela was saying, to get any more student debt. So I know this was important for me, and I don't know about Villanova's program right now, but I would say I know there's biology at Villanova and maybe some other core STEM science or STEM, and then also biochem at my undergrad school, the University of Scranton. So I think those are just two examples, and you can kind of, if they still exist, since it's been a couple of years now, you can look to see what they offer and it's a start. And then if you Google them, you can look for further options for this graduate teaching assistantship, which is a GTA. Kayla, are they called something else, or does anyone know so people know if they need to search for that?
I think it's still called GTA. I also know that there are some other options out there. So some of the people in my program, at least for the University of New Haven, there are also research assistant positions where it's a graduate research assistantship. And so instead of teaching, you did research instead on a given project, or even helped learn how to run a lab, or at least assist in helping run a lab. That's another option as well, where they give a lot of the same or at least similar benefits to the GTA.
I was just going to briefly also add in that for the actual act of applying to grad school, like the actual application, there are also a lot of fee waivers. So most schools will offer a fee waiver, and actually a lot of people will meet the requirements and you just might not realize. And so you can almost always get a fee waiver if you meet those requirements. And even if the requirements aren't listed on the school's website, if you just find the head of the program you're interested in, or someone in the dean's office, just shoot them an email being like, hello, I'm interested. Do you have a fee waiver? They'll usually try to figure something out for you.
Another
also, the
great
same with GREs.
Oh, yes, very true. As a last thing, just as a source to apply for scholarships to graduate school, I would also be remiss if I didn't mention just government funded scholarships. So two big ones are the National Science Foundation, and that's huge to undergraduates because you can apply for a graduate school scholarship to cover your master's, for example. And you write up a research project, and you don't even have to identify a graduate school that you want to go to yet. You just get funded for being for you as a student who wants to do science. And then when you do apply to graduate school, you become very competitive because you now bring this prestigious award with you. So in addition to the National Science Foundation, the National Institute of Health is another fabulous place to look. If you're interested in neuroscience, there are subspecialties within the National Institute of Health. So for example, my lab is funded from the National Institute of Mental Health. There is the National Institute of Drug Abuse, et cetera. And so if there's a specialty that you're interested in, you can look at those individual NIH programs and see what types of scholarships are out there as well. So government funded ones are a great place to look. So now
Can I quickly add to that? It's just super related. So through the NIH, I just want to say, if anyone, I'm not going to jump the gun here because I see another question about going straight into graduate school, but the NIH also offers you paid research experiences, or it's like a post-bac. So you're basically doing research, and they typically match, say if you have some experience, they will pay you more. So I think that's another great opportunity. Although it's not a master's degree, you are getting funded to get more experience. And it's a great option since getting into a doctorate program is competitive, could be very competitive.
This is a good segue to move into the next to one question that you touched on, Ashley, and that is it possible to not do a master's degree and go straight from undergrad to doctorate? Kayla, go ahead. You sound like you're ready to take that on.
No, I just said absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean,
Um,
that's, oh, no, sorry, Kayla, I thought you were,
No, it's okay. I was just like, yes, you definitely
Go
just
for
go
it.
for it. I was just very excited as well.
I can
just
actually
like how Jackie was like, no.
because I think both Michaela and I have
Mhm.
experience with that. And so I think what's great here is that Michaela and I have two different examples. So Michaela got work experience before applying, and I applied in my senior year of undergrad. And so I see someone here had a question about, can you apply before your senior year in undergrad? I don't, I think it's all about whether, I think you have to have a BS degree to apply. So you would have to, on your application, they ask you when you're expecting your degree. And also once you accept their offer, you have to send them your final transcript. So I believe, I mean, if you were potentially graduating college early, so that might be like your junior year for you, that would be possible. But I think you have to be at the point where you're reaching your terminal degree. But so it's definitely possible to not do a master's and go straight from undergrad to doctorate. I did that. And I think what most PhD programs are looking for is that you have some type of research experience so that you know that you are interested and committed to a career in research. So do you want to talk about that a little bit more, Michaela?
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry. I felt like I cut you off. So I wanted to give you the
No, I
opportunity.
was fascinated. Yeah, so that was like Nancy said. Well, so I started off actually doing research pretty early on as an undergrad, but that was just because I got work study and I was very lucky that I was able to find through my work study a lab that just needed somebody who would like help out. And then I ended up staying with that lab, getting paid by them through the work study, but also gaining all this research experience that was really helpful. Then when I was graduating, I knew I wanted to apply to grad school, but I also knew I needed one, money to be able to like move. And then I also just knew I wanted to take the time to really consider where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I had to take the GREs, do all these things. I just wanted to like really focus on that for a year. So I took a year after I graduated and I basically continued working for that lab as a volunteer, but then I also was working full time with people who had the mental health issues and substance abuse issues. And so that was how I was able to like support myself, was getting this interim job. And that can be like research, could be clinically like something that interests you. And if you can get paid for it in that interim period, as well as gaining the experience, then great. But so that was something where gaining that experience was really helpful. And then I went into grad school. I wouldn't say refreshed, but I went into grad school and I made it. So.
I have something quick to add. And I want to say, so I'm a second year right now, and I'm pretty sure my class, which is about 10 people, half of them went straight from undergrad to the graduate program, and the other half maybe had a job in industry or had a master's or had some type of work experience. So I would say it's definitely possible, you know, yeah.
So I'm gonna, thank you guys. I'm gonna move on to another question. So what advice would you give to current undergraduates who want to pursue a PhD in neuroscience?
Well, where do we begin? I mean, I'm an old soul, so maybe I'll comment because I'm, jaded. But um, I would say if you don't have lab experience yet, get some, just because make sure one, even if this kind of can apply to anything other than neuroscience, because I've seen a ton of people come through the program and realize, hey, I don't really like this. And it's a long commitment. I mean, honestly, 2-3 years is long, just like 4 or 5 is. So if you're even thinking about it, I would say work in a lab just to make sure it's something that you would really like, because you're going to be doing it for a pretty long time. And if you don't, a lot of schools will let you kind of leave at least with a master's, and maybe you could then move on to something. Because as Kayla was talking about, you can take a master's and do so many things with it. Sometimes they don't even care what your degree is in, just that you have a master's and you know how to kind of think scientifically. So that would be my biggest thing, is just make sure you really, really, really want it.
Another piece of advice I'd add is that I would say to do your research. So neuroscience is a very broad field, and different graduate programs in neuroscience, depending on their faculty in the neuroscience department, they offer very different coursework. And so I would say to definitely like to do your research and look at the differences between the programs. Using Drexel's neuroscience program as an example, we're extremely diverse. So we have one of the best spinal cord groups in the country, I would argue. And many neuroscience departments may not even have people working on the spinal cord. And so depending on what it is that you're interested in, different programs will be best tailored to your desires and interests. So that's one piece of advice I would also have. Kayla, you looked like you had something to say.
I'm not a neuroscientist, but I would just like to remind everybody that if you're interested and you're passionate about it, there's no reason why you shouldn't go for it. But also, as like an extra little detail, any degree, like any school, anything that you do, it's more of a marathon and less of a race. So just focus on what you want to accomplish and what you want to do, and then take your time picking the right program and the right mentor and the right lab culture for you, because all of those things are super important with what you want to do at the end.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ashley.
It doesn't, well, I guess this is just on the perspective of, let's say, an applicant. So I know we're going to have a panel, I think, next Wednesday or next week on this, but I think something that's important is like, so research, you keep doing the same thing over and over until it works. And not, there's a lot of troubleshooting if you have research experience. So it just, I want to say that you getting that research experience is kind of helping you gain resilience, because, as you go through this career, there's going to, it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to come to you if you're a perfect scientist, because I need to know the secrets. But I'm just saying that, like, when you're applying, I think, like, if you're doing applications, it's really important to focus on, reflect on how you showed resilience and kind of pull that through with your application. And they're going to speak about this a lot more next week, but I hope that this touched a little bit upon, like, the application portion of it.
So we have a really great question here. Are there ways that you all would suggest to get involved or complete research volunteering during COVID, since a lot of programs are online?
So I have a couple of suggestions. So it depends on what you like to do in terms of what you would like to do in research, and also like the field that you're in for COVID, like the field that you're interested in for COVID. So for example, in my lab, we do a smidge of COVID-19 research, but we're also very bioinformatic heavy. And what that means is that we're really doing a lot of number crunching on the computer. So one way that you can get involved even now as an undergraduate student is to really help dig through the numbers, because as all of this continues, there's more and more research out there, but it's kind of hard to see the full picture if all the pieces are out of sorts. So you could always volunteer that way. Any effort put in will help in order to actually building that clear picture as to what's going on with COVID-19. So that's one way. Another way is that a lot of labs are, if they're able to and if they're open to, depending on the different institutions that you look into, you could ask for research experience in terms of COVID-19 research, whether that is with information reviewing or even working in the lab in some capacity.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of like research opportunities that can be done actually virtually. Like I know in our lab, for example, we actually had a med student who was just helping out, but almost everything that he did was all like analyzing data on a computer. And so some of those kinds of things can really easily be translated. And it's honestly, from the grad student perspective, so helpful. So there are a lot of different ways that you can try to get that research experience, but either virtually or even if it has to be distanced. It's more just like reaching out to these different labs and like seeing what they are able to do given their university or their institution's guidelines.
Yeah, I want to echo what Michaela said. I think just reaching out is to some professors at different universities will post online that they're looking for people to work in their lab and whatnot. And so you can see if people still have those offers up there, and just kind of cold email and say, you know, I know that we're in a pandemic, but I'm still really interested in any type of research opportunity that you may be able to provide. So those are some good suggestions.
Totally agree with that. That's what one person is actually doing in my lab right now.
Yes, my lab as well. So really don't be afraid. Researchers love to talk to people, professors, grad students. So I did this as an undergraduate. I cold emailed professors like, are you taking graduate students? Do you have room in your lab? People are really friendly and more open to talking than you may think. So I really encourage everyone to just reach out to people. So I want to move on to some other great questions that we have. So one question we have is, when should you take the GRE?
So I think that I'm gonna dive in. I think that one is like such a variable, because it really, again, depends when you're going to be applying to grad school. For me, I actually have ADHD and really severe test anxiety. So I knew I wanted to get actually accommodations for the GRE, and trying to get accommodations takes forever. So that was one of the factors that actually contributed to me deciding to like take my time after graduating, so that I could really figure out the process and have enough time to study for the GRE, because you do need to study. And so the GRE in itself, like all other standardized tests, are not actually to measure any sort of intellect. It is purely just how well can you play the game of strategy. And thankfully, a lot of grad programs are steadily moving away from even requiring the GRE. But if the GRE is required in a school that you're interested in, I suggest trying to take time to map out, like, how much do you want time to study? How much time can you even devote to that studying? And then based on that block of studying, make sure you plan enough time to take the test at least twice, because you'll want to take it the first time so that you can get the nerves and the jitters out. You can take it a second time, and then you can cherry pick the best scores from your GRE that you want to send to the schools. That's my thought.
Nancy, when did you, since you transitioned straight from undergrad to graduate school, when did you take your GRE?
I always say, do as I say, not as I do, right? So I was very nervous about the GRE. So I took it at the last possible moment that I could. And I don't recommend doing that. But I first just want to touch on the fact that so many graduate schools are getting rid of the GRE requirement. There is a huge chance that you don't have to take the GRE. So definitely look at the program you're interested in. If you guys aren't on Twitter, science Twitter there's like a whole universe out there of scientists on Twitter, and people have compiled like a Google Doc of schools that don't require the GRE. I can look for that information, and if any of you want to email me, and I can try to get that to you, so that information exists out there. I took the GRE, I think, so graduate school applications are in like November, December time, and I think I took it in October. And so a lot of people, it's good to plan ahead, because a lot of people take it more than once. I couldn't financially afford to take it more than once, and I couldn't afford to take a prep class. I'll never forget, I was with my little GRE. I worked as a prep cook in college, and I was like in the back of the kitchen with my GRE book open while I was making food. But so I know what that feeling's like. So my first suggestion is to look, because many schools are getting rid of it. And there's a huge chance that you can save yourself the headache of taking it. And if you don't have to save yourself the headache of taking it, I would say to not wait until the last minute like I did, because that just causes you more stress than you really want to. And I think anytime, maybe more in the beginning of your senior year is maybe is a good suggestion, like even summer, fall. I know some people take it earlier than that, but I would say around the summer or fall of your senior year is a good time.
To add on to that, I was scared of the GRE when I was graduating from my bachelor's, and I was like, I don't know, because at that point I just came out of taking the MCAT, because this is at the point where I was under the full belief I was going to go to medical school. And so the master's program that I ended up looking for ended up being the one I actually attended. And that one actually had no GRE requirement whatsoever. So that's what I did up until like when I had to apply for my PhD. And like Nancy, I waited until I had no choice but to take it. And I actually took it twice. But I just want to let you know that the GRE website does have financing options available. So it's kind of like a two thing, like one, does your school need it? But two, also the GRE themselves will waive if you can just show the paperwork. And it's better to, to be safe than sorry. So it's okay to ask. Plenty of people ask. I didn't take a prep course, I couldn't afford it. And I was actually working at a medical office. So if you can imagine working in a medical office and then looking at the GRE book and going, oh goodness, math, like another math question. That is kind of like how I took my whole GRE experience. And I waited until October 27th so that I can get it November 27th so that I could apply December 1st. Don't be me.
Nick, I just want to quickly say, so I got out of taking it. I took the MCAT. I think I took the MCAT twice, which was not fun. But with that being said, I never took the GRE, and one school allowed me to use it, the MCAT that I took, and in other schools it was optional. So I applied 2 years ago, just so everyone knows it's possible to not take it.
I was only just going to add that, so I also got a fee waiver for taking the GRE. I remember there was something really weird about trying to get a fee waiver more than once, and it was something really frustrating. But I think I was able to get like a fee waiver for definitely at least one of them. And then I took it the second time and just had to bite the bullet. But I remember that even though the trying to get accommodations for the GRE was pretty difficult and strenuous and obnoxious, but getting the fee waiver was shockingly easy. So if you just meet their requirements, they will hand it out like candy. And then the other thing I was gonna add with the GRE, that for math or other types of, if you know, like, oh, I'm not the best writer, or oh, I'm not that great at math, there is no shame in going back to the basics, because personally, I'm horrible at math. So I literally bought a book that was everything from addition and subtraction up until I think calc or pre-calc, wherever the GRE is. And I kind of set a schedule for myself of just teaching myself that. And so, and I know other people have done the same thing similarly with writing, and you can get some of those prep materials very, very discounted, cheap. And actually some grad students might even be giving it away for free at local universities. So like if somebody emailed me and was like, hi, can I have your GRE materials? I just give it away. So that's always an option too.
Thanks, Michaela. All right, we have about 5 more minutes, so I just want to quickly touch on our last question so that I get to everybody. So this question asks, what studies have worked for you to be successful in graduate school?
It depends on what your study style is. So for me, I'm much more of a person that I learn better by looking at a picture and seeing diagrams and even making my own. That would help me immensely in terms of recalling what I needed to know for grad school, especially for some of the harder courses. Also, I learned that I'm one of those people that I don't like studying, but it helps having like a block time that's very consistent and reliable every day, as opposed to just going for it maybe on the weekends.
So
Yeah,
go ahead. You go.
I was just going to add that it's not too bad either, because it's, at least for us, it's only the first 2 years that you're taking classes. I don't know if people know that, because I didn't know that when coming in. And most of the professors' PIs are pretty understanding, where, trying to balance lab and studying and all that stuff is tough the first 2 years. So balancing those is difficult, but you do have, like, at least for us, I feel like most people could say they had pretty good support throughout it. And the studying, I mean, it's kind of hard to say a strategy because everybody has their own way, but I mean, grad school is like next level studying, I found. So don't try to procrastinate, all I can say.
Literally do whatever that works for you. Anything.
And just being flexible. Like the way I studied for our medical neuroanatomy course was so different than what worked for me for studying for our neuroscience, or like our graduate neuroscience course, which was different than what worked for me for, our biochemistry course. And so it's really about like willing to be flexible with yourself. Maybe what you were doing in undergrad might not work this time around, and and really just reminding yourself throughout the process, because imposter syndrome is a big thing in graduate school, that you deserve to be there and they accepted you because they know that you can take these classes and succeed. And keeping that in the forefront of your mind when you're trying to study, I think is also is really important.
There are also really great YouTube channels. Personally, I accredit all of my grades to Shomu's Biology, SHOMU. Amazing, amazing. And he's a sweet little man who just like draws everything out. It's great. And obviously, like, Khan Academy is great, but towards the grad school level, it gets a little bit basic compared to what grad school is like getting into. So if you're like just trying to learn a concept, just look it up on YouTube and you'll be shocked what you can find as far as videos that explain the concept in a very easy, comprehensible kind of way. And then also just acknowledging with yourself like how much time you have to study, because when I started off in grad school, I liked taking notes by hand and using colors to designate things. And then I very quickly realized that was not time efficient. I had a lot to cover, my hands are too slow, and then I got carpal tunnel and I was like, this isn't working. So you have to, as Nancy said, be flexible in that, but then also like acknowledging the time that you have for devoting to it.
I love that you said that, Michaela, because I definitely dedicate most of my stuff to Armando Hasudangan over on YouTube. I probably mispronounced his name, but that person saved a lot of heartache. And also, like, you have to be gentle with yourself. And a lot of schools, a lot of programs also have tutoring centers. And there's been quite a couple of times when there was something I just, no matter how many YouTube videos I watched, I needed a real human being to tell me, like, right, what was going on.
Yeah, I literally echo exactly what they said. I took classes, like the majority of my classes last year, and I had to like completely learn a different way of studying. And something I'm imagining most schools have this. I know our College of Medicine does, but it's called like the class services. And basically it just like, they actually help you with making better study habits. So like, and also your peers, once you go in, there's going to be upperclassmen. So you can always ask them for help of like what might, work when the time comes.
Yeah, it's not a silo. It's not just you versus the world. It's you plus your program. And sometimes, you just need to talk with a friend who's just really good for some reason at some subject, and like work together to actually like fill in all the gaps in whatever you're working with.
And actually that point, even though you're referring to it in the context of classes, is what will be all of grad school. Because like, if I need to understand something about like brain signaling or anxiety, I go to Nancy. If I need to know a specific technique, I can go to Ashley. Like that's where kind of getting that understanding early on is important, because that's going to be everything in your career.
All right, so since we reached 5:15, I'm going to wrap us up. I want to thank all of you in the audience for being such an engaging group. We really appreciated your questions. This is the first of three panels that we're going to have. So next Wednesday, I hope that you all join us for a talk that's more detailed on the application process for applying to grad school. And the following week, we will wrap it up with more detailed information about how to get research experience. And we've dropped our Gmail in the chat here, so hopefully you all saw that. And if you look up any of our names in the and search like Drexel College of Medicine, we should pop up for you. We really want to reiterate that our goal as a group is to increase representation in science from historically excluded minorities. And so we would love nothing more than to serve as your mentors on this journey into graduate school in STEM. So please feel free to reach out to us at any time. And we're looking forward to seeing you at our next event. So thank you so much.